What new terror abounds in Paris?
Who is the disfigured man atop Notre Dame?
And what about Phoebus?
These and other questions will be answered in this week's
It's Frenzy Frights.
Welcome to Frenzy Frights, a horror movie review show. My name is Gerry.
And I'm Chris.
And we are your hosts.
On Frenzy Frights, we're going to talk about horror movies, monster movies, creature features, and spook shows of all sorts. We love these movies, even if sometimes they fall short. We will share our love for these films, but also point out issues in a genre-appropriate way.
Chris, what movie are we talking about today?
Thank you, Prof. We're going to discuss Hunchback of Notre Dame. This was directed by Williams Dixterly. The screenplay was by Sonia Levian and Bruno Frank from the adaptation. It was based on The Hunchback of Notre Dame, a 1831 novel by Victor Hugo. We're going to talk about the version from the late 1930s. For our cast, we have Charles Laughton as Quasimodo, Sir Cedric Hardwicke as Frollo, Thomas Mitchell as Clopin, Maureen O'Hara as Esmeralda, Edmund O'Brien as Gringor, Alan Marshall as Phoebus, Walter Hampton as Archbishop, and Harry Davenport as King Louis XI. This was distributed by RKO Radio Pictures. The release date on this was around Christmas time back in 1939. It came out December 29th. For the running time, this was just under 2 hours at 116 minutes. Prof, can you please give us a brief synopsis of the movie, and then we will follow it up with our own thoughts.
You betcha. So, of course, I'm going to spoil the movie, and also a trigger alert. There is a use of the G word to refer to the nomadic Romani. So I'm going to replace the G word with the word Romani, but I think you can guess what they're calling these folks. The movie opens with a Star Wars scroll by the way of the Middle Ages. We are in the late 1400s. France has peace at last after 100 years' war. Cool. Louis XI seemed like a great guy, a great king who likes all the new inventions like the printing press and stuff. Seems like a very forward-thinking man. Frollo, the tightly wound Chief Justice, doesn't like the printing press. He fears the power of the informed populace. He isn't wrong, especially in Paris, but he's still a jerk. The Romani are being kept out of Paris. You came here yesterday, we come today. But one woman from the caravan sneaks into the city. She is Esmeralda. Esmeralda is a dancer, and today is Fool's Day, so she's out to make a few bucks from the crowd. Quasimodo is the bell ringer at Notre Dame. He's disfigured and is a hunchback. Poor guy. He is feared by the city people. Now, Fool's Day is for dancing, feasting, and electing the king of fools, the ugliest man in town. People poke their heads through a hole in the board and expose their ugly faces to get judged by the crowd. Weirdo after weirdo do this to mixed results. Now the king watches Esmeralda dance. Frollo says, "She's a Romani," and the king replies, throwing a coin to her, "Who cares about her race? She's pretty." You know, why be racist when you could be misogynist, right? And these are the good guys. Anyway, Frollo sees Esmeralda, and it is giving him feels. He might be a racist and puritanical, but boy, look at her. He is powerfully conflicted. But since he's a powerful man, I'm sure he'll handle his emotions maturely, right? Right? Okay. Esmeralda sees a weirdo face through the hole in the wall, and she screams. People chase the figure. It is Quasimodo the bell ringer. Quasimodo is chased to the King of Fools board, and his face appears through the board, and we get our first real glimpse of Charles Laughton as Quasimodo. Amazingly cool. He terrifies the crowd, but by and by they realize he's just an old mush, and they crown him their king and celebrate him. Somebody's even written a Quasimodo song somehow. But Frollo, his surrogate father, sees the commotion and makes Quasi leave his celebration in shame. Quasi is Frollo's little bitch. Esmeralda is almost caught by, ice, but runs into Notre Dame and claims sanctuary. The church takes her in and says Quasimodo can take care of her when he gets back. At the church, she prays to a statue of Mary, Mother of God. She's inspired by that. She prays not for herself, but for her people. Frollo catches her praying, looks at her, and boy howdy, he's going through some things. She says his hands have the mark of the devil. Frollo calls her a witch. Esmeralda talks all high-minded about the beauty of the church, while Frollo is transfixed on something or other underneath her blouse, if you can imagine. When she catches his eyes, she says that she can see love inside him. Love or something. He's not evil, she thinks. Frollo does melt a bit. The king overhears her praying, and she wants to talk to the king about the plight of her people being refused entry into Paris, and the king says he'll think about it and let her know. Esmeralda meets Quasimodo. He frightens her, and she runs out of the church. Frollo sends Quasi back to get her back, and he catches up to her in the city and goes to carry her away, but then the armored soldier, Phoebus, king of day, saves her from Quasi and arrests him for kidnapping the pretty lady. Now, Quasi is deaf, and we see a funny courtroom scene with an official who's also deaf, and they should take that act on the road. It's pretty funny. So Quasi gets sentenced to the pillory, to be basically whipped in public, even though Frollo knew he had ordered this action. Meanwhile, Esmeralda has been taken in by Beggar Nation, the dirty Parisian underbelly people. We meet Gregoire, a playwright of dream ballets and other artsy-fartsy stuff. Gregoire finds himself trespassing in Beggar Nation, and he's black-bagged and sentenced to hang unless someone marries him. Esmeralda accepts, and he is saved. The pair are married, and for their honeymoon, Esmeralda takes him right into the friend zone. Oh well. Frollo orders all the females in Beggar Nation to be arrested and brought in for inspection. None of them are Esmeralda. She is in the wind. Quasimodo is on the pillory. First he's whipped and then left to bake in the sun for an hour. He calls for water. No one brings any, but then Esmeralda comes out of hiding and gives him some. He is in love with her. So, just to recap, Quasimodo, Frollo, and Gregoire are all in love with Esmeralda, but she loves Phoebus, king of day. Gregoire puts on a play where Esmeralda will do a dance, but backstage Frollo corners Esmeralda, and she is super creeped out by some of his observations of her, let's say. Then she dances. Phoebus, king of day, sees her and is smitten. The pair sneak off for a private dance in the woods on the ground. They have smooches. Frollo sees them together and kills Phoebus, king of day. Esmeralda is blamed and arrested. Frollo, the chief justice, sentenced her to hang even though he knows he did it. Her death will purge his guilt over the death of Phoebus, king of day. Quasi says he did it, but nobody believes him. As Esmeralda is getting ready to be hung, Quasimodo swoops down on a rope from the top of Notre Dame and carries her off to the cathedral. Sanctuary, sanctuary, in one of the most thrilling 10 seconds in movie history. Quasi and Esmeralda get friendly in the cathedral. They're just friends, but Q is crushing. The rich people, including Frollo, petition the king to break sanctuary to get Esmeralda. Gregoire reads a speech he'll deliver to the king, and the beggars march on Notre Dame to protect sanctuary. Frollo admits it was he who killed Phoebus, king of day, to his brother, the archbishop, and is arrested in the way rich people are arrested, very, very loosely. The beggar king, who looks like Uncle Billy from Bedford Falls, I wonder why, demands they release Esmeralda so they can protect her from the nobles, or they will break into Notre Dame to get her. But the craft guilds arrive to protect the church from attack. That's how rich people split up the working poor, the union against the poor people. Quasi thinks everyone is here to hang Esmeralda, so he starts throwing stuff at the crowd from the top of the cathedral. Big beams, stones, stuff like that. They use the beam as a battering ram to get into the church, but Quasi pours molten metal that had conveniently been cooking in the bell tower on them. The injuries horrific, the music triumphant. The soldiers arrive and clear the square. Frollo chases Esmeralda up the bell tower. Quasi follows. Frollo almost kills Q by pushing his ladder and throwing stuff at him. He goes to stab Quasi, and Quasi sees Frollo's betrayal and tosses him off the cathedral roof. The king pardons Esmeralda and announces the Romani can live in Paris. Esmeralda and her husband, technically her husband, Gregoire, run off in love. Quasi watches them go and then says to a gargoyle, "Why was I not made of stone like thee?" The end. Whew, quite a movie. Chris, what did you think about The Hunchback of Notre Dame?
Prof, it had been so long since I've seen this movie, and I can't thank you enough for putting it on our list of things to talk about and review. It's a fantastic film. Before we share more of our thoughts and do a deeper dive, as per usual, I'll get some trivia out of the way. And there is a lot, so bear with me, listeners. This was really, really good. In 1932, it was reported by the tabloid The Hollywood Reporter that Universal announced that it would remake the 1923 Hunchback of Notre Dame film, with John Huston writing a script, and that Boris Karloff would actually play Quasimodo. Irving Thalberg, who was an uncredited producer in the 1923 movie, considered remaking it in 1934 and even discussed the idea with Charles Laughton. 2 years later, though, Universal regained interest with the remake, and they conducted a fan poll, being instrumental in influencing the studio to make the film. Ronald Colman, Paul Muni, Frederick March, Lionel Barrymore, and Peter Lorre were the choices in the poll. And in the end, Universal decided to go with Peter Lorre, even as far as negotiating with the actor to star in the film, but the project never even materialized. For the production, RKO Radio Pictures built their movie ranch on a massive medieval city of Paris, and Notre Dame Cathedral was in the San Fernando Valley. This was one of the largest and most extravagant sets ever constructed, and I had no idea. I had the actual European vibes when I watched this movie. Okay. Screenwriter Sonia Levian was entrusted to translate Hugo's novel into this film. She made the story relevant to the events of the time of the production. She even made the obvious parallel between Paris's persecution of the Romani and Germany's treatment of the Jews prior to World War II. With respect to the casting, after hearing that RKO was going to remake the film, Lon Chaney Jr. sought to play the role of Quasimodo and even screen tested for the studio. The studio felt that Chaney gave an excellent performance in his numerous screen tests, and other actors, though, might be more suitable for the part. Orson Welles himself was even being considered. Charles Laughton was set to star as Quasimodo, but RKO offered Lon Chaney the role when it seemed that the British actor was going to be unavailable to work in it due to the troubles with the IRS. Charles Laughton managed to overcome his tax problems, and he did get the part. Now, pleased with her work that she did on Alfred Hitchcock's Jamaica Inn, Charles Laughton brought in a then 18-year-old Maureen O'Hara to Hollywood to play Esmeralda. This marked Maureen O'Hara's American screen debut. According to, though, actress Catherine Adams, she said she was supposed to play Esmeralda, but she lost the role to O'Hara when Laughton cabled from Ireland to Hollywood that he was, quote, bringing Esmeralda. Adams did play a companion of Flora as compensation for losing the role. It was also determined that somebody in the powers that be wanted Claude Rains to play Philo, but he agreed to play the part had he not had an unexpected encounter with Laughton on the Universal lot, in which Laughton made very condescending remarks to Rains, who had mentioned Laughton and Gielgud in the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. He later remarked that their encounter was so traumatic that it ended their relationship, and Rains refused to play the role that eventually went to Cedric Hardwicke. The movie had a budget of $1.8 million, and this movie proved to be one of the most expensive movies ever made by RKO Studios. It was shot in the Encino Ranch, with the interior bell tower being shot at the Mudd Hall of Philosophy at the University of Southern California. The sets of Paris and the Notre Dame Cathedral were constructed by an individual by the name of Vanis Pollich at the cost of $250,000, which is about just short of under $5 million by today's standards. William Plunkett oversaw the costume design. J. H. August served as cinematographer, and this is being the first collaborations with the principals of the technical crew. The filming was really, really difficult for the cast and crew due to the hot temperatures of California, and in particular for Laughton himself, who had to act with a lot of makeup. Now, in her autobiography, Maureen O'Hara recalls one day arriving on the set and finding chimps and baboons and gorillas. And this was because the director wanted monks on the set, but the assistant mistakenly thought it monkeys because of the poor English and thick German accent. Now, makeup artist was Perk Westmore. He was on loan from Warner Brothers to RKO for this production. And Westmore and Laughton just didn't get along, though Westmore wanted to use like a sponge rubber to make a lighter appliance for Laughton to wear. Laughton wanted a heavy one to help him stay in character. Laughton was offended when Westmore simply suggested, hey, try acting as if the lump were heavy, and he was rude and dismissive to Westmore throughout the filming. Near the end of the shoot, Westmont called his younger brother to the studio, where he witnessed Westmore, while strapping on the hump, spray Laughton in the face with a seltzer bottle full of quinine water, and then kick him in the butt.
Wow.
Westmore told Laughton, "That's for all the grief you gave me," unquote, and added that his brother was a witness to this so that he would deny Laughton said anything about the incident. The shooting also was culminating at the time when Poland was invaded by Nazi Germany on September 1st. Most of the cast and crew kind of was in a state of fear about what was going to happen. Laughton lightened the mood by reciting the Gettysburg Address. Now, he previously recited it in the film Ruckles of the Red Gap. Another incident of emotional filming was the filming of the scene where Quasimodo rings the bells of the tower of the cathedral for Esmeralda. Now, at the time, Laughton was feeling the pain because the Nate Britain was just declaring war on Germany. So Laughton rang the bells over and over until he fell down from exhaustion. Wow. And this really overwhelmed the crew with their own emotions. There were some changes with respect to the characters in this. The characters of Claude Frollo and Jean-Han Frollo were changed from the novel. This was done because the filmmakers were concerned about portraying the priest as a villain might violate the Hays production code at the time. In the novel, Claude is depicted as the villainous 36-year-old archdeacon of Notre Dame. In the film, he is a good character and much older. His younger brother, Jahan, is a teenage drunken student as well as a juvenile delinquent. In the film, he is middle-aged and the villain, and he's also Paris's chief justice and close advisor to the King Louis XI character. This has gotten great reviews over on Rotten Tomatoes. It currently sits at 93%. For the scene in which Quasimodo is whipped, Charles Laughton instructed assistant director to twist his ankle outside of the camera, just out of range, so he could kind of feel pain. Now, even though the heavy hump and rubber bodysuit was affixed, Laughton felt every lash and often came home badly bruised. Now, before the 16th take, and I'm reading this thinking, what, 16 takes? My gosh. The director dearly whispered to him, "Now, Charles, listen to me. Let's do it one more time, but this time I want you to suffer," unquote. Wow. According to Laughton's wife, Elsa Lanchester, the actor never, ever forgave him for that. For a little bit more of trivia, this was the only movie screened at the first Cannes Film Festival.
Oh.
First and only. Why was it the only one? Well, the remainder of the festival was canceled after Hitler invaded Poland on September 1st of that year, so they just scrapped the whole thing. Prof, let's get into it. What were your initial thoughts and impressions of this movie?
All right. Well, I love this movie ever since I was a kid. This has been a classic for me. I think Charles Laughton is fantastic as Quasimodo. I have a lot of points where I just think he does amazing things acting in a mask where you can only really see half his real actual face. He's very compelling. You really feel for him. And you understand why he is like he is, why he's doing what he's doing. Now, I also think Hardwick is great. The character of Frollo, the villainous Frollo, just makes this movie for me. He is repressed. He has all these strong urges, towards Esmeralda, but he can't do it because he's this chief justice. He's this, law and order. She's, a foreigner. She's this, evil person, right? That he's fighting against. And there's a whole movement against these Romani invaders. But he is attracted to her and he is struggling with that. And boy, oh boy, Hardwick is... You can see the split between the outgoing person and the internal person in his acting, in his execution of this role. And I think he is magnificent. There's a lot of other, great elements in this movie. I really like Harry Davenport as the king. I think he's very kind of folksy, kind of like a middle American, common sense kind of guy. Now, Louis XI died in 1483, so this movie takes place before that, but what another thing that I really like, there are a lot of echoes of the French Revolution here, right? The French Revolution isn't coming for another, couple hundred years, but you can still see, people getting organized, a lot of discussion about, informing people, the populace, public opinion, all that stuff. That's going to come to haunt even good kings like Louis XI, his successors after that. So I think this is great in a time period historically. I think it's very rich, having come from a novel, a very, complex and deep classic novel. And it carries the themes pretty well. I have some comments about how the themes get kind of muddled, and some of your trivia comments kind of straighten out for me now why this has a couple of problems that it has. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But I think this is a great movie. I just think I can't really be objective. I know it's long. It's a very long movie. It's a slow movie, but I find it gripping and compelling most of the time. How about you, Chris? What do you think about The Hunchback of Notre Dame?
Prof, I can't thank you enough for bringing this to the table to talk about, because it had been so long since I had seen it. And I tried to remember when the last time I saw this was, and it had to be probably as a child, and I can't believe so many years have elapsed. This film, to me, I think is very, very close to a masterpiece, if not an actual masterpiece. I think when you talk about films that everyone must see sometime in their lifetime, there are, quote, must-watch films. I think this is one of them. I think this is really a classic, and I just don't know how much of the public consciousness has of this. Of course, we had the animated version, most recently, and that brought some things to the forefront. But I don't know how many people went out to seek this particular adaptation of this, because there have been several, and I think this is arguably one of, if not the best. And we're going to talk about it a little bit more. From the scenery to the acting to Laught's performance to O'Hara's performance, everyone is pitch perfect in this. I love that it's shot in black and white. I was totally immersed with the sets. It just feeling I was in Europe and in Paris at the time. Granted, with the English, it takes a little bit of distance out there. But just selling of what the people were going through, and just the revelry they had, and just what passed for entertainment, and just the humiliation that Quasimodo endured, you just couldn't help but feel for this character. And it just really, really would break your heart, if one has a heart, just to see all the trials and tribulations the character went through. Prof, there's a lot to dive into it, so let's take a step back, and then we'll single out some of our favorite moments of the film. And I'll start with wondering what you thought of. I mean, in a movie that had so many great moments, what were some of your favorites?
Well, one of my favorite moments is Quasimodo is talking to Esmeralda. He is in total love with her now, right? He is just beside himself with love. And he says to her, "I have something to say to you." And he covers his face. He covers the ugly parts of his face, the one side and his kind of nose and his mouth. And he just peers out with his eye. And everybody knows what he wants to say. He wants to say, "I love you," but he can't. And he runs away to the safety of the gargoyle. And I just think that moment is so powerful. Like, you really feel compassion, at least I do, for Quasimodo, a man who is a pure soul as good as anyone, but stuck in this broken body. And wants love, just like everyone. Emotional love, familial love, physical love. And just because of being in this broken body, it's a struggle for him. And he's a kind, pure soul, and he's just in pain. It's just so amazing. Just the way Laughton is able to convey this is just fantastic. There's a lot of talk in this about superstition versus reason, and it's not always clear which is which. And it's a comment you made kind of clears that up for me, because I wasn't thinking about the novel. It's been a long time since I read the novel. So I think a lot of this conflict is set up in the brother versus brother, the Frollo versus the archdeacon, the rigid Frollo versus the compassionate, man of Christ who wants us to love each other and wants us to, accept the immigrant, stuff like that. But in this case, reason, Frollo, who's the Chief Justice, has these weird vibes about things. He's almost superstitious. And the archdeacon, who is, you would think, religion, which would be more the superstition. No. Here the archdeacon has reason. So it's really interesting, this conflict. And Chris, when you mentioned that they changed Frollo's character to take him from being a priest to making him the Chief Justice, that makes a little more sense thematically, but I think it works better here, like they did it in this movie. There's a couple of quick scenes that I thought were fabulous. Quasimodo, when he had been King of Fools, and Frollo comes and takes him away, everybody's angry at Frollo for taking away their king. But Quasimodo, that's his dad in his mind. He has to be a good boy, so he chases all the people away from Frollo, and he uses this, jingly King of Fools cap that they gave him to kind of swing it, and he's swinging it, and it's jingling, and he's scaring people with it to make sure that they stay away from Frollo and let him do his thing. I also like the scene where Esmeralda gives Quasimodo water on the pillory. Just the scene between those two where she's going to be compassionate towards him, and he first refuses it because she's so beautiful or whatever, and then he finally gives in and kind of, goes for it. There are a lot of kings in this movie. We have the King of Fools. We have Phoebus, King of Day. We have the King, Louis the 11th, and we have the Beggar King. I don't know what that means. Is this just a bunch of tarot card kings or whatever? But there are a lot of kings. Now, I also, kind of interesting bit, I had the Aurora model kit of Quasimodo on the pillory. So this is another reason why this movie really resonates with me. Another scene, Quasimodo playing the bells when he's gleeful with his arms and legs, and he's hanging onto the bells going, as they gong. That might be the point you told about him being upset about, Britain entering the war. And the last one I wanted to mention is when Esmeralda is being tortured. Frollo goes to watch the torture. Like he at first he can't keep his eyes off it, and then when she starts screaming, he has to back off and back away. I thought that was more of Hardwick's great acting there. Chris, how about some of your favorite moments from The Hunchback of Notre Dame?
Can you imagine if today we had some type of festival where we declared a King of Fools and who would show up and what would happen? And as I'm watching this play out, and a massive amount of food gets thrown to the stage, and I'm just wondering, where in the world did they get all this food? And I thought food would something be of a commodity, a valuable item, but no, I mean, a lot of food gets thrown, and thrown with pretty good accuracy from the extras, so shout out to them. Laughton's performance, I think, is really well done here. I just think it's so spot on, and I could not find a flaw with the performance. Playing someone in agony and just aching for a little bit of ounce of compassion that he's not getting here, and just everyone laughing at him with respect to that. I like the pride the people have, though, because I think there is one bit where the torturer is getting visibly taxed with all the whipping that's going on here, and he's kind of wiping his brow thinking, okay, give me a fresh whip. And it's like, what world is this? And there's a little comment off to the side where two people are musing, well, if the torture had been from my town, he would have been crying. It's like, wow, what kind of professions did we have back then, and just all the pride they had in their respective torturer in each little borough and burg and little city that we have. And I thought that was kind of an amusing little bit there.
It's like Joe DiMaggio versus Ted Williams, right?
Yes. Who's got the better torturer? That's funny. I talked about Laughton. I want to circle back to Maureen O'Hara because a lot of the movies I've seen her in where she was a much more older adult role, and I hate to admit it, but I kind of spaced that she was playing Esmeralda here, and she's in her teens, but she looks way older than her actual years in this, and a lot is being asked of her doing these moves with her dancing, and to me, it was a little weird seeing her in this role because I was so accustomed to seeing her in color movies with John Wayne and all the body of work that she did with Quiet Man and McClintock and the whole list. And don't forget, though, she was also in Miracle on 34th Street, yes, black and white, and the original Parent Trap. So, I mean, just to see O'Hara in this, and when you think of all these other films that she did, don't fall asleep on The Hunchback of Notre Dame. They spent a bundle on the sets, and I think it really showed. If you are to really be a quibbler with respect to this, during the research of the movie, I read that on the film here, we see steps going up to the main entrance of Notre Dame, when in actuality, it's more closer to the street level. And granted, I was in Paris when I was in fifth grade, but I went by Notre Dame, but I really didn't make a note that, it's level with the street to go into the side there. That said, please, the sets were phenomenal and award-winning, and I just can't help but think they got some mileage out of them because they were really, really great. Prof, you mentioned too the performance with respect to the rulers and the monarchy here with this. And I like how he's sort of taken aback like that. It's like, well, what's that? It's a printing press. And look what we could do with this. Wow, that's great. We could see the middle-age shift here. But the guy is so self-aware of the time he's in with respect to that. I like it. And there's a scene where he's getting bathed and his bather is scraping him too hard on the skin. And he says, well, maybe you should think about maybe bathing more than once a year. How about twice a year? And I'm thinking, wow, can you imagine what the stench may have been off of all these people if that's as often as they've bathed, and all the disease and dirt and grit with everything like that. I like the little moments where they kind of remind us of the time period that we're in here, the advancement of the printing press, things kind of continually be pointed out, and just little things like taking a bath and how might a rare occurrence this have been for some of the populace was really nice. And I like those little nuances and touches with respect to that. There were all little gems of scenes in this movie. I think I was careful not to point things out. Some things were violent. Some things were sort of alluded to with respect to the violence. It was shown in such a way where, what would be an appropriate age to show a child this movie, and if so, how old? And I don't think it really was. There were some mean and nasty things in this movie, but as far as the violence go, I mean, even with the murder of the other character, it was I don't know if we necessarily saw it. All of a sudden, someone is shouting, "Murder! Murder! There's been a murder!" So here we are. This is a great movie. I think this is a quote unquote classic. I have to think this has to be seen by just multiple generations, but I just don't think it gets a lot of love that it should. Prof, that's really all I had. Is there anything you wanted to talk more about or circle back to?
Yeah, I think you're right about this being a classic movie that I think people overlook. Spenguli, right? They'll play the Universal movies, they'll play, Hammer movies, things like that. This Hunchback of Notre Dame kind of falls in the cracks of a couple of things. It doesn't have any of the, the Karloff, Lugosi, Christopher Lee, kind of, Peter Cushing. It doesn't have any of those horror actors other than kind of Charles Laughton, who was in Old Dark House. And, of course, he was also in Island of Lost Souls, which we've already covered on the show. And so these are the two of the three Charles Laughton horror movies we've already covered. We'll probably get to the third at some point. But there's no real classic horror actor in this movie. The director's not a horror director. It's a big budget. It's got, beautiful sets. It's a classic novel, stuff like that. It's not a horror movie like Frankenstein and Dracula are horror movies. But it's still, I think it still has that horror-y kind of vibe. It's got, even though in this case, the monster is probably the good guy, it's still, I think, fits in that horror movie category for myself. What do you think about that, Chris?
I totally agree, Prof. It does sort of still have that horror vibe, and it just doesn't pop up. It would be nice to see a little bit more of this getting some play and a little bit of love on some of the media outlets.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you for checking out Frenzy Frights. Check out our other shows, the Professor Frenzy Show, where we cover indie comics, That Guy in That Show, where we look at great character actors, and our Twilight Zone episode review, where we review Twilight Zone episodes. Thank you for watching and listening.
It's Frenzy Friday.